Now you may have noticed that we have a whole series of things that we can trigger with a single wise event. So that is in fact the case. You can set up a whole series of things that happen when the game engine triggers a particular event. So we could, for example, create a start ambience event and use this to initiate all of the ambiences in a game with a single event container. So in our case, we really only have two that we could use for this purpose. We have city traffic and honks. So we could have this event trigger these two audio containers when we initialize a particular level in the game that has a lot of city traffic. Of course, we don't want these starting suddenly. It's a bit intense. So let's fade them in. And so that's just a really good way to trigger a whole bunch of different kinds of sounds that you need in a particular scene all at once, just with one single initiate event. Also, don't forget, there's a lot of other things that you can do within this initiating event. You could, for example, kill all of the immediate sounds of the previous scene using a stop event. You can see that we need to place an audio container in here. We could also use a game parameter. Let's say that our city traffic was actually a blend container that was moving between different levels of city traffic, from light traffic to heavy traffic. We haven't got that set up, but if we did, we could also create specific start ambience events for particular times of the day. So we could then go in and set that game parameter. And even though we may already have the game parameter value where we want it, you can use set game parameter to just confirm that values are where you expect them to be when particular events are triggered. This is a really good way to just confirm that everything is reset. You can set game parameter to a particular value, or you can also even use reset game parameter. And you'll notice that you have that with some other things as well. For example, with voice volume, you can set voice volume. You can also reset voice volume. You can also reset voice pitch, and so on and so on. This is really good to just send things back to their default value to make sure that things aren't stacking in unexpected ways. For example, let's take a look at voice volume. Set voice volume. Just for kicks, we'll use the honks for this. So now we have this event, set voice volume. We did notice when we played the volume of the honks was a little loud. So let's set the voice volume to -5. Now, just for kicks, let's say I don't know what the voice volume of this is offhand. I want this to be -5 of the relative value. So whatever honks is set at, let's say honks is set at -10, I want this to be set at -5, the relative value. That means it would now be at -15. Now, using relative value events, that can be dangerous because especially if you're increasing the volume of something, like say increasing the honks to +5 relative their normal value, and this event gets triggered multiple times without resetting that value, you're going to start getting some really loud noises and you might not be able to track down what's causing this. So be careful, be wary when you're using the relative events. If you want to be doing this, you really need to make sure that you're resetting your sounds later. So let's look at a specific example of one of the things you can do to control that. Let's create an event and we'll call it master door. Let's say that there are certain doors that are really intense, they're especially important to gameplay, and first of all, we just want to play a big door sound at that point, but perhaps we also want to play some kind of sparkle or stinger, then we could drop that into this same event. And let's say we want that big door to play extra loud, but only for this specific kind of event. So you could set it up to increase the voice volume of that big door sound. You could have it increase, say, 5 decibels of whatever your normal volume is, relative speaking, but you really don't want to accidentally leave that set up so that the next time the player triggers a regular door, it sounds like a big door. So the way to make sure that this is going to get reset is, let's say the big door sound is 10 seconds long. Let's give it a listen. Let's say for safety, 6 seconds. So what we can do is we can go in here and we can set up a reset voice volume trigger for that same big door sound, and we can delay it 6 seconds. If you wanted, we could even delay it less than that, 4 seconds, and then put in a fade out so that we don't hear the volume suddenly change. And this way, the voice volume of Big Door would always be reset after it's triggered. So again, when you're changing things like this, when you're setting voice volumes or pitch volumes or any of that, especially if you're using relative, make sure that you have some control in there to reset that value later, or you're going to get some really uncomfortable stacking and it's going to be some trouble debugging, trying to figure out what happened in the game. Now, I've been showing you a lot of the different things that you can do with events, including setting parameters, but something to keep in mind is that all game syncs, not just parameters, but also the other game syncs we'll be looking at in later modules, they are also exposed to the game engine. This means that in code on the game engine side, you can also control and affect game parameters, game syncs in general. However, you might not have the same grain of control that you do with a game parameter. You might not have the fade in time or the curve. This stuff would take a lot of extra code. It's not quite as apparent. So you do have more control over how setting game parameters and game syncs in general works if you're handling it on the Wise side. Ultimately, in your game design, you'll probably want to use a combination of these. Sometimes it just makes more sense to do it in code, and sometimes you're going to want that fine-grained control of doing it within an event. Just be aware that both options are available to you.